Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
There is a certain kind of silence that settles in a room after a punchline nobody dares laugh at, a thick air that you could slice with a butter knife and still struggle to breathe through, and if you grew up like I did, you'd know exactly the kind of silence I mean. My name is Claire, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the dependable one, the fixer, the quiet daughter who did not demand, who did not shine so bright that my parents had to squint. That spotlight, the warm, blinding one where applause comes easy and wrongs are smoothed over with a chuckle and a pat on the head, that always belonged to my younger sister, Emily. Emily was born under a lucky star, or maybe it was just that she figured out early on how to wrap our parents around her little finger, flashing dimples and crocodile tears whenever life dared not go her way. Broken vases, stolen candy, botched school projects, overdue rent checks. The list went on, but every mistake she made was somehow transformed into an endearing oops in the eyes of Mom and Dad. Meanwhile, if I so much as missed a curfew by 5 minutes, you would think I had committed treason against the family name. Growing up under that kind of imbalance doesn't make you bitter right away. No, at first it just confuses you. You think, maybe if I just try harder, maybe if I make myself smaller, better, more useful, they will see me too. But eventually, after enough birthdays forgotten, enough report cards pinned behind Emily's latest art project, after enough quiet dinners where nobody noticed you were crying into your mashed potatoes, it sinks in. You realize you are not a daughter in their eyes, not fully. You are the control group, the one they measure her sparkle against. I learned to live with it, the way you live with a pebble in your shoe when you're too far from home to bother taking it out. I made peace with being invisible. I got a good job, kept my head down, sent polite holiday cards that nobody answered. It was fine. It was manageable. Until the day of Emily's 30th birthday party, when the dam finally broke and I realized manageable was just a fancy word for slow, quiet resentment. The party was held at this upscale restaurant downtown, the kind where the menus don't have prices and the chairs are so soft you sink 3 inches lower than you expect. I arrived exactly on time, wearing the navy blue dress that always makes me feel a little bit braver, a little more visible, like maybe tonight they would see me too. I carried a simple gift bag with a nice sweater for Emily, a safe gift, not too flashy, not too impersonal. As I walked in, I saw the sea of guests already there, all old family friends and Emily's coworkers, laughing too loudly, ordering cocktails with names I could not pronounce. The first thing I noticed was the giant banner strung across the room, "Happy Birthday to our star," in shimmering gold letters. Subtle, it was not. Emily was in the center, of course, holding court like a queen at a coronation, laughing at jokes that weren't funny and tossing her hair in a way that somehow made her look both sophisticated and 12 years old at the same time. I took a seat near the edge of the room, close enough to be seen, but not so close that I would interrupt the pageantry. Mom and Dad flitted around, beaming like they had personally invented her. Every so often, someone would glance my way and nod politely before turning back to the spectacle. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. I tried to savor my steak, to listen politely to the guests sitting next to me who droned on about golf scores and real estate prices, but my heart wasn't in it. I kept thinking, maybe this year will be different. Maybe this year, they'll remember I exist too. When the cake came out, a monstrosity of pink frosting and edible gold leaf, of course, the real show began. My father tapped his glass with a fork, calling for attention. He stood up, clearing his throat in that theatrical way he always did before making an important speech. "We have a special surprise for our sweet Emily," he said, voice trembling with what he probably thought was fatherly pride. He motioned for my mother, who clutched a sparkling envelope like it was the Holy Grail itself. Emily squealed before she even opened it, the crowd leaning in, smiling in expectation. Inside was a brochure for a luxury cruise, 2 weeks through the Mediterranean on a ship so opulent that even the brochures smelled like new money. Emily gasped theatrically, tears springing instantly to her eyes, and our parents basked in the applause that wasn't even really meant for them, but which they soaked up all the same. I smiled, clapped politely, and waited. Maybe there would be something for me too. Maybe a smaller envelope, a kind word, even just a nod of recognition. Instead, my mother fished around in her purse and handed me a card, without fanfare, without even standing up. Just a card. I opened it. Inside, in cheap glitter pen, were the words, "Your gift is our love." I could have laughed if it wouldn't have broken me into 1,000 pieces right there at the table. But I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just slipped a folded piece of paper from my purse and slid it across the table to them, slow and steady. They had no idea the birthday candles weren't the only thing about to be blown out. There is a moment right after public humiliation where everything slows down, almost like the universe itself is giving you a few extra seconds to decide whether you are going to lose your mind or just smile through it. And sitting there with that glitter-penned card in my hand, I chose the smile. I sat there, holding that flimsy piece of paper while Emily clutched her cruise voucher like it was a winning lottery ticket, and everyone in the room clapped like they were at some royal event. It was sickening, honestly, watching grown adults fawn over her like she had cured cancer simply by existing. I turned the card over once, twice, as if maybe, just maybe, there was a check tucked inside, or even a gift card to Starbucks, anything to soften the blow, but there was nothing. Just a line about their everlasting love, as if love was going to pay my mortgage or cover the rising gas prices that had been kicking my ass all year. Still, I kept my face straight, nodding along like a good little daughter, the same way I had been nodding along my entire life. Mom leaned in close, her perfume too sweet and cloying, whispering that she hoped I understood, that experiences were just so much more important when you're young, and Emily needs a little sunshine after all she's been through. As if I had not been through my own private hells that went unnoticed simply because I did not whine loud enough for everyone to hear. And for the record, since it matters to nobody but me, I have been busting my ass working the same job for 27 years since I was 15, which, when you do the math, makes me what, nearly 50 by now? No, wait, that can't be right, can it? I am 42, not 50. Clearly, math was never my strong suit, or maybe emotional math just doesn't add up the same way when you are counting disappointments instead of dollars. I chuckled quietly to myself as that thought floated by, because really, if I didn't laugh, I was going to flip that entire table and watch the chocolate fountain drown every single one of them. I watched as Emily threw her arms around Mom and Dad, wiping fake tears from the corners of her eyes, clutching the cruise voucher to her chest like she was a soldier returning from war, while people cooed and snapped pictures for their Instagram stories. I wondered, briefly, if any of them would remember this moment a year from now when Emily was crying broke again or calling to say she had wrecked another car or dropped out of another life-changing opportunity after Mom and Dad had footed the bill. Probably not. People have a way of forgetting the ugly parts when they are too busy polishing the pretty ones. Still, it was not my place to correct their selective memories, not tonight. Tonight, I had come prepared, and not with some angry outburst or scene-stealing tantrum. No, that would have been too easy, too cheap. I had something better, something quieter, something that would unravel their perfect little evening thread by thread. I reached down into my purse, careful not to rush, careful not to draw attention too soon, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smooth and deliberate, like a magician setting up for the final reveal. I placed it on the table in front of them, just beside my untouched glass of wine, and slid it across with 2 fingers. Mom frowned first, that tiny wrinkle forming between her brows the way it always did when she was confronted with something she did not immediately understand. Dad leaned in, his hand moving to cover the paper like he could somehow stop whatever it was from existing if he just touched it fast enough. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs slowly, savoring the moment. Emily, too busy reveling in her newfound cruise ship princess status, did not notice the shift in the air yet, but she would. Oh, she would. Because what they held in their hands was not just a piece of paper. It was a receipt. A receipt for every ignored phone call, every overlooked accomplishment, every quiet swallowing of hurt feelings. It was a receipt for the debt they had racked up without ever realizing it, thinking that favoritism and neglect were things that just evaporated with time like mist in the sun. It was proof that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take 30 years to arrive, gift-wrapped in quiet vengeance. I smiled wider, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the cheap Chardonnay and everything to do with knowing that, for once, they would have to sit with the discomfort. They would have to open that envelope and realize that love, while nice, does not pay the bills they now owed. They would have to understand that actions, even the ones you pretend not to see, have a price. I did not cry. I did not shout. I just smiled and slid a folded paper across the table, one that would cost them a hell of a lot more than any cruise. It is funny how people are so quick to call something a mistake when it costs them nothing but name it a betrayal when they are the ones left holding the bill, and if anyone should know that, it was me. Sitting at that ridiculous birthday party with a folded piece of vengeance disguised as paper in front of my so-called family. I watched them fumble with the receipt I had handed over, eyes narrowing and widening in equal measure, expressions flickering between confusion and dawning horror, and it all took me right back to the start of it. The day my sister made the kind of mistake you don't just shrug off with a sorry and a hug. It was about 4 months ago when the first strange charge showed up on my credit card statement, something small enough that I almost missed it, some overpriced handbag from a boutique in Los Angeles, a place I would not step foot in unless someone paid me to. But at the time I thought, well, maybe it was fraud, and I filed a claim with the bank like anyone else would. The bank reversed the charge, issued me a new card, and I moved on with my life, barely giving it another thought because real life leaves little room for drama when you are busy paying bills and surviving one boring Tuesday after another. Then came the second charge, and the third, and the fifth, and by the time I caught it, there were dozens of them, slipping through like fish through a broken net, charges that piled up into tens of thousands of dollars, designer clothes, jewelry, spa visits, even a down payment on a private resort vacation in the Bahamas, all slipped under my name, billed to my account, ignored by the people who were supposed to love me. I confronted Emily first, because somewhere deep inside me, there was still that pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, she would own up to it, apologize, offer to fix it like a normal, decent person. Instead, she gasped, hand to her chest like some dime store actress caught pocketing a necklace in a soap opera, and insisted she must have grabbed the wrong card by mistake during one of our family get-togethers. Because apparently grown adults do not check the name printed on the card they are swiping to fund their shopping addictions. She played innocent, blinking rapidly, squeezing out a tear or two for effect, and when Mom and Dad caught wind of it, they rushed in to shield her before I could even get a full sentence out. It was just a mistake, Claire, Mom said, voice trembling with the sheer audacity of her denial. You know how forgetful Emily can be sometimes. Family forgives, Dad chimed in, as if forgiveness was some kind of free buffet they could keep piling offenses onto without ever paying the bill. And like the fool they took me for, I let it go for about a week. I told myself that maybe they would come around, that maybe the responsibility would finally click into place for once in their damn lives. But every time I opened my mailbox and found another statement stamped overdue, the anger built, layering itself over years of other small slights and major betrayals until it hardened into something cold and sharp and permanent. So I did what responsible daughters are apparently supposed to do. I called a lawyer. A good one, the kind who understands how to dig through paperwork and find every crack, every loophole, every tiny, inconvenient truth hiding in the fine print. It turned out that because Emily had used my card repeatedly without authorization, and because she was technically listed as financially dependent due to some tax documents my parents had filed during one of her rebuilding years, I could legally redirect the entire balance, every last bloody cent, to them. The transfer was clean, airtight, 100% above board, and it included interest, late fees, and penalties for breach of contract, because if I was going to be the villain in their fairy tale, I was damn well going to do it right. I packaged it all together into that folded piece of paper and waited patiently, sipping my wine, while the birthday party stumbled along toward the moment of impact. And now here they were, faces pale, hands trembling, realizing that the cruise they had gifted so freely was nothing compared to the shipwreck about to crash into their perfect little fantasy life. Mom stammered something about surely we can fix this, and Dad muttered darkly about overreacting. But it was too late for band-aids, too late for apologies whispered in the dark. They wanted to pay for her birthday? Good. Because they were now footing a 6-figure bill, with penalties. For a moment after the truth sank in, after the numbers and the ugly details began to bleed into their perfect birthday scene, there was a hush so profound you could hear the air conditioning rattling weakly through the vents, trying to cool a room that had turned into a slow-burning fire. Mom was the first to break the silence, her voice slicing through the tension like a rusty blade, high-pitched and shrill in a way that made several guests flinch visibly in their seats. How could you do this here, Claire? You're ruining everything. It took every ounce of restraint I had not to laugh right then and there, not a polite chuckle but a deep, gut-wrenching laugh that would have made me look every bit the villain they had painted in their heads for years. Instead, I simply leaned back in my chair, the wine glass cool against my palm, and watched as my father grabbed the paper with one hand and tried, with the other, to shield Emily from the growing realization that not even her wide, innocent eyes could magic this one away. Emily, to her credit, put on a show worthy of a standing ovation. Tears sprang into her eyes so quickly I half wondered if she had eye drops tucked into her sleeve for emergencies like this, and she made a strangled sound in the back of her throat, one that might have seemed genuine to anyone who had not grown up listening to her rehearsals. She whispered brokenly, "I didn't mean to. It was just a mistake." Over and over like a scratched record that could only play one pathetic song. Mom rushed to her side, arms flung dramatically around her, glaring daggers at me as if I were the one who had emptied a bank account and lied about it with a smile. Dad, ever the negotiator, the fixer, the man who could smooth over a totaled car with a handshake and a firm voice, leaned in close to me, his words low and private like we were co-conspirators instead of combatants. "Claire, let's step outside for a moment. Talk this over privately. No need to make a bigger scene." I smiled at him, the kind of smile that never touched my eyes, the kind that said you have got to be kidding me, and took another slow sip of my wine, letting the silence between us do all the speaking I needed. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the frantic calculations, the desperate reaching for a way to clean this mess up without it staining their precious reputation, and for the first time in my life, I let him sit there and stew in it. Around us, the guests began shifting uncomfortably, exchanging glances that spoke volumes, the whispered commentary starting to buzz like flies around spoiled meat. The perfect family image was cracking wide open right there in that expensive, overpriced restaurant, and there was no amount of champagne toasts or hollow speeches that could patch it back together now. Some guests were already pulling out their phones, no doubt pretending to check messages, but really texting the delicious gossip to everyone not lucky enough to be present for the slow-motion implosion. And just when I thought it could not get any better, just when Mom's pleas and Dad's negotiations were reaching a fever pitch, I reached into my clutch and pulled out my final card, the tiny USB drive, small and innocuous, but heavy with truth. I placed it carefully on the table between us, tapping it once with a manicured finger, drawing all eyes to it like a magician drawing attention before the final trick. "You might want to listen to that before you accuse me of ruining anything," I said calmly, watching their faces flicker with confusion, suspicion, and, finally, the creeping dread of people who know deep down that whatever hope they had of controlling the narrative was about to evaporate. because tucked inside that tiny piece of plastic was a recording, crisp and clear, of Emily laughing about how she used my card, bragging that Claire will never notice, she's too busy being responsible. A little gem I had captured purely by accident when she left a drunken voicemail she had thought was being sent to a friend, but instead landed squarely in my lap. I watched Dad's face go pale as snow, the color draining from his usually ruddy cheeks, while Mom clutched at Emily tighter, as if holding her physically could somehow shield her from the inevitable. Emily herself turned a shade of green that clashed terribly with her expensive pink dress, eyes darting toward the exits like a trapped animal realizing the walls had finally closed in. Around us, the whispers turned into low murmurs, growing in volume, curiosity bleeding into outright judgment, the kind of noise that sticks to you long after the party ends, the kind of stain that not even bleach can erase. This was not the kind of family scandal you walk away from with your head held high. This was the kind that followed you through church pews and grocery aisles, that clung to your name like static cling you just could not shake off. I let it sit there, let them all stew in the consequences they had spent a lifetime dodging, my heart pounding not from fear but from the sweet, unfamiliar rush of finally choosing myself over their comfort. No, I was not the bad guy here, no matter how much they tried to spin it. I was simply the mirror they had spent years avoiding, now shoved right up against their faces under the bright, unforgiving light of reality. And just like that, the princess's tiara hit the floor, and it was not gold underneath. The days after the party slipped by like heavy fog, each one thick and shapeless, sticking to me in ways I had not expected even as I had walked away from the wreckage, without so much as a backward glance. You always think when you finally stand up for yourself, when you finally shout into the void that has swallowed you whole for years, there will be some glorious feeling of triumph waiting on the other side, but mostly what I felt was a quiet, aching emptiness. The kind that settles in your bones when something familiar, even something poisonous, finally leaves you. For weeks after that night, the phone stayed silent, no passive-aggressive voicemails from my mother asking when I planned to come to my senses, no stiff, formal emails from my father pretending nothing had happened while slipping in backhanded compliments about how mature I was being. Emily, the golden girl herself, disappeared from social media altogether, her once endless stream of curated brunch photos, pool selfies, and humble brags about her amazing life screeching to a sudden and noticeable halt. It was only a matter of time before word got around town. Bad news travels faster than the speed of light in small communities, and our family name, once dragged out proudly at every charity auction and PTA meeting, had become something whispered about in supermarket aisles and gas station parking lots. I did not gloat, not openly anyway, but there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that the fairy tale they had built on my silent suffering was now crumbling into dust, right where everyone could see it. Every so often, curiosity would get the better of me, and I would check Emily's Facebook marketplace listings, watching with detached amusement as she tried to sell her designer bags and jewelry for pennies on the dollar. The same bags she had once flaunted at family dinners while Mom cooed and Dad beamed with pride. Now, they were listed in grainy photos with captions like barely used and urgent sale, the desperation bleeding through the screen, so thick it almost made me pity her. Almost, but not quite. Was it cruel, what I did? Maybe. Some nights, in the thin stretch of darkness before sleep claims you and your thoughts grow louder than your heartbeat, I would wonder if I had gone too far. I would wonder if the smart, calculating move had cost me something more precious than pride, something I could never quite get back. But then I would remember every time they had made me feel invisible, every Christmas where I sat at the edge of the family photos, every birthday where my card came with a sad $20 bill tucked inside, while Emily got plane tickets and new phones and hugs that lasted just a little bit longer. Letting people get away with betrayal, letting them walk all over you while you smile politely and fold yourself smaller and smaller until you disappear altogether. That is the real cruelty. The kind that rots you from the inside out until you forget you were ever meant to stand tall in the first place. So no, I would tell myself firmly, staring at the ceiling in the dead of night, I was not the villain. I was just someone who had finally stopped playing the fool. It was 3 weeks after the party when the letter came, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no return address, though the handwriting scrawled across it was unmistakable. My father's hand, once so steady and formal on tax returns and report cards, now slightly uneven, a little shakier, like the weight of reality had finally caught up to him. I turned the envelope over once, twice, debating whether to open it or toss it straight into the trash without ceremony. In the end, curiosity won out. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of lined paper, creased once down the middle like even the act of folding it had been a burden. There were no grand apologies, no teary admissions of guilt or promises to do better, only one line scrawled in blue ink, "We hope you find peace." No signature, no love, Mom and Dad, no acknowledgement of the years they had spent choosing convenience over love, shining lights over shadows they pretended did not exist. Just that cold, empty blessing, tossed at my feet like a bone to a dog they no longer cared to feed. I stood there for a moment, holding the letter in my hand, feeling the rage and sadness rise like bile in my throat, and then, without ceremony, I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it into the trash can by the door, the paper landing with a soft, final thud against the banana peels and junk mail. I did not need their peace. I had my own, and it was worth every damn penny. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder what came next, whether there was a path back to something resembling family or whether that bridge was truly burned beyond recognition. I would wonder if Emily cursed my name when another handbag went unsold, or if my parents sat together at their kitchen table, wondering how the daughter they had once called the sensible one had turned out to be the hammer that smashed their carefully constructed glass house. But most nights, when the wind howled outside and the world settled into its slow, grinding rhythm, I felt nothing but a fierce, quiet pride, the kind that comes from knowing you finally chose yourself, even when the cost was higher than you had ever dared imagine. Maybe I destroyed a family. Maybe I saved myself. Maybe those two things are not so different after all.